Next. Now, what has been a major concern to actors within this space has been the extent to which development assistance is not matching the growing trend of the crisis. You will realize that Ghana, like you will find out later, is acting more in the frame of the globe. Globally, we are more focused on humanitarian assistance. And you see that we wait when the crisis hits, then suddenly you find all manner of development assistance coming to address the crisis. But what, or humanitarian assistance coming to address the crisis, but what is critically needed is how can we set in place the right infrastructure, the right capacities, the right institutional frameworks that can better enable us address the crisis that is coming with extreme weather events. That, if you see, the blue shows the humanitarian side, because that is more reactive. But the developmental side, development assistance that will give us permanent solutions to the problem, it does look like here there is a lag. And that shouldn't be the way we should be having a forward-looking mind to the crisis that is unfolding before us. Indeed, way back last year, the World Economic Forum, through its Global Race Report, had already highlighted the fact that going forward, climate-related crises were going to be on the ascendancy in the next few years, 2 years. And then their projections into the 10 years did show that, in fact, you see that the first 4 issues are all environmentally related crises that would impact us going forward. And so this calls for the need for us to prioritize our responsiveness to issues of extreme weather events. So what are the authorities within the food and agriculture organization space saying? If you look at the graph before us, you see the long-term average of rainfall. You will notice that over the years, there is a lot of climate variability. You are not seeing a consistent trend. You see that this year's is so varied compared with the other previous years. So what we are indicating from, well, what we're sourcing from the secondary data is that the FAO said that from the beginning of July 2024, rainfall averages were lower than the long-term average. A total of just 7 millimeters of rainfall was recorded, while the long-term average was 24 millimeters. So you can see the variance, and this confirms the extent and magnitude of the situation. The World Food Programme, which is also responsible for addressing food crisis globally, did also do their assessments right here in Ghana. They did project that a meteorological drought started to be observed in May, mainly impacting the districts of Sola, West Gonja, Central Gonja, Bole, and Banda in the Savannah region. They also found that the drought continued and extended into the east and started to impact some districts in July. And these were particularly Central Gonja in Savannah and the Wild West and Upper West region. Overall, their standardized precipitation index did show that Bolo district was the worst affected in terms of this year's drought. And we'll show just how this situation manifests. Unfortunately, I don't know, the lighting may not give you the opportunity to see. But if you see anywhere between red, gray, and yellow, they are just demonstrating the extent and severity of the standardized precipitation index across most parts of northern Ghana. Again, the World Food Programme did look at using data from NASA, the latest data from NASA, did show that the number of dry spells, the days of dry spells, had increased between 2022, 2023 to 2024, whereas only between 10 and 18 days were recorded in 2022, and 10 to 14 in 2023. In 2024, as we have it, we have between 10 and 37 dry spell days, which gives you also an understanding of the magnitude of the situation. And so, what would logically be the impact of this precipitation index in terms of our potential to produce and produce convincingly? This is measured through what we call the agricultural stress index, which is just simply a measure of the cropland that is possibly available for cultivation that was affected by the dry spells. And as you can see, again, if you see the red patches, these are the severely affected areas across the northern part. You see that the southern part basically is looking much better, but northern Ghana is really, really in dire straits. So what then is the vulnerability context? If you have a standardized precipitation index that is so bad, and you have an agricultural stress situation that is also equally bad, quite naturally, you would agree that the production base that can support whatever we can generate to address our food security challenges will be compromised to a great extent. And so the World Food Programme, again, did identify the areas that were worst affected on account of what could happen by way of food shortages. So they highlighted places such as Wa East in the Upper West region, Saboba in the Northern region, and Uyo Naswan district in the Northeast region as areas that already have high incidences of food insecurity, but are again burdened by this new development of dry spells, which is also going to further undermine their productive capacities. So if you look at the next map, it shows you what was done by the World Food Programme in 2020, focusing on the Comprehensive Food Security and Vulnerability Assessment Report. You will see that much of the food security situation, the evidence clearly shows that Northern Ghana is the worst affected. Now, already these are people who are in this bad situation. And then now, the major area that engages a chunk of the population is also stressed by way of drought. So you don't need an academic like me to come and stand here and confirm to you that what is coming would come. But the good question then is, what has our government done in light of this? What pains me as an academic practicing in this field is the fact that as far back as May 2024, GMET, a very important institution of state that is mandated to help us understand some of these situations, was not taken seriously by government, either deliberately or it was inadvertent. But I get the feeling that as a nation, many times we enjoy crisis situations, particularly, forgive my language, particularly the political class. It appears crises create an opportunity for contingency spending. And we all know what our procurement laws, the room that our procurement laws provide when there's an emergency situation. So like my Vice Chancellor pointed out, you see, until we deal with those 3 C's and begin to take institutions of state that are mandated to help us understand some of these issues seriously, we would have a major problem at hand. Please go to, I will show you, forward, yes. I will show you, these are just maps of, I gleaned these pictures from the internet based on various media reportage of what has happened by way of the drought in northern Ghana. But more seriously, I wanted to look at the GMET's forecast. Yes, go forward. Yes. Way back in May, GMET had already given this forecast. And the forecast or the outlook looks really, really exactly what did happen. They said the 2024 rainy season agroclimatic analysis of the northern part of Ghana indicates a higher likelihood of late onset with significant probability of normal to long early dry spells, long to normal late dry spells, and late cessation. This was an outlook that came to the attention of government as early as May. For northern Ghana, our planting season begins within this period. Ideally, what ought to have happened at this point would have been for government to say, okay, GMET, come sit with relevant institutions of state, such as the decentralized department of the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. Let's sit and look at the seasonal outlook. What do we do? What kinds of advices do we generate? And what resources should we devote to ensure that the masses are adequately educated about what the outlook is going to be, so that it can better guide their decisions in terms of what type of crops that we should plant in light of the outlook? What types of, what times in the year or in the farming season should we target to plant whatever crops that we are going to plant? And to see how you can give some targeted interventions in terms of the inputs that they need to be able to adapt to that given outlook. Sadly, that didn't happen. It never happened. So we waited, and we went through 2.5 months of drought. Then suddenly, government comes, and they're now giving us what they want to do in light of the crisis. I don't think that is how anybody would want to run your home. If Ghana were once one person's personal property, this is not how you will run it. Because you cannot have a institution of state that has all the evidence. They point to you. GMET's outlook also even did give indication of what kinds of adaptation measures would best suit this kind of outlook. These were all ignored. And today, this is the kind of crisis that we face. And we are certainly hitting on our contingency to draw vital resources to address a problem that we knew would come and which has solutions handy. I don't think if we need, you see, this is a national security issue. Food is a national security issue. And just as much as we are worried about the situation around the Sahelian regions in terms of violent extremism, we should as well extend that level of seriousness to the agricultural space. Because hunger could even kill us much speedier than when there's war. Because when there's war, our soldiers may give us a buffer by defending us for a while. So we may have to live for a longer while. But when you are hungry, the days are defined. It doesn't go beyond some weeks. You will go. But we could defend ourselves for more than a month or so. So it is important that as a nation we begin to think wider in terms of food. Food is not just about eating. It's also an issue of national security. And I think on this front, government failed us. So you take us back so that I will now give you how government responded based on the evidence that we saw. So a report from the Northern Regional Department of Agriculture revealed that about 460,000 hectares were affected, representing about 60% of the population in that region. Unfortunately, we didn't get any evidence from the other northern regions in terms of the estimated impact of the drought or the dry spell. Next. And as at August 25th, our Minister of Agriculture came through a press conference and indicated that their estimated losses is about 3.5 billion. Had we even spent 1 billion to operationalize GMS forecast, I'm sure the narrative today would have been different. Because why? Our agricultural experts do know what type of crop will fit what kind of outlook. And they know what kind of agronomic practices would fit or suit any given outlook. And so if we are taking action based on what GMS told us, we shouldn't be talking about this level of losses. But here we are. That is what we are saddled with. And elsewhere, maybe some people would have answered questions or would have lost certain positions, vital positions, because you cannot sleep over your job in this way. If the evidence for you to act is absent, that is a different story. But when the evidence is abundantly available, and out of negligence or maybe lack of priority, you get people who have been confirmed. Upper East region like this is the most food insecure region in this country. Luckily for them this year, they have normal rains. They are the only exception to the other regions of the north. But you go to northeast, we have severe food insecurity. That is just their vulnerability context. And then to have this come on board, and then solutions are handy and nobody is doing anything, I don't think that is the right way to go as a country. And now we are told that the estimated, these regions that have been affected account for about 62% of the country's grain supply. So it means that, as we said, 62% of whatever grain supply that we have to support our survival is at risk. And if you see, I interacted with a couple of people here that are farmers. They give you an account of what happened to their maize fields. You'll be amazed. And you know, most of our staples in this country are closely anchored to grains. So if it's the 2%, so you should be thinking about this also in light of food security, in light of national security. Now, let's see what the government's response to this situation is. Government says we are imposing an immediate ban on the export of key crops. And they're talking about maize, rice, and soybean. For those of us who have interest in food sovereignty, these crops don't mean much. These crops, if you look at them from the value chain and business side of things, yes, valid, they are good. But if you look at it in terms of food sovereignty, people's right of choice to whatever food they want, or what it is that they eat very often, these are not really, if we take, for example, where I come from, pearl millet is by far an important grain compared to these that are listed. If you go to Upper East, most households, when they say they're eating TZ, they're eating TZ from pearl millet, not maize. Maize was just only a recent introduction. And so, how is government engaging or even taking interest in appreciating what it is that the people really eat, and to see how we can provide security around that? That doesn't appear to be the case from this kind of ban that you're talking about. So it means that all the other food crops that are of importance to them in terms of food sovereignty, people are free to export those because there's no ban on them, not so. So if you have pearl millet, that could probably even bridge our hunger gap by, say, a month, and you have better market in Mali or Niger, you can take it and nobody's going to stop you. Because per the ban, that one is not included. And so I thought that we ought to have had a more thoughtful approach to this process. Can we fundamentally establish what is it that the people eat? What is it that they need by way of proper food sovereignty? And not just the priority crops that we are looking at in terms of our planting for food and jobs phase 1 or 2. That cannot be a good measure of food sovereignty. And so we have, as academics, legitimate questions to ask within this space. They are saying they also map out stock from farmers to prevent losses. That would mean they're coming down south. But again, you are saying the place where 62% already is coming from, you are now coming down to 38, where 38 of the rest of the supply is coming from. To do what? It can replenish, it can feed those here, and to cater for those who are up there. And so that in itself, for me, is not a very thoughtful approach to the process. They did say they also procure some grains from ECOWAS's grain reserve. Those who are familiar with what happens there will tell you that this might as well look like a wild goose chase, because do we really have an operationally functional ECOWAS reserve? That is very doubtful. If I were to take a decision for my family in light of that reserve, I might think twice. And so that again, for me, or for us in UDS, is something that probably requires further thinking. Now, they say they are going to write off 90% of the loans that have been advanced to farmers. The good question is, loans from which banks? You see, because there is a question of exclusion and inclusion. So, for example, if we just to take maybe ADB, we all know how much ADB even gives to our farmers. It may not be anywhere close to this figure. I don't have the facts, but I doubt very much if it's up to this figure. And farmers take loans from multiple sources. Good question is, how is government able to really know how much is owed in order that they can write on 90%? So that in itself sounds for me like a political statement as opposed to something that's grounded on fact. Again, they say they now want to collaborate with GMET. GMET has already done its work. You don't need to collaborate. They have given you all the evidence base that you needed to run, but you did nothing. And so I will say this is precisely the source of our pain, because an institution does its work and you don't act. And now when you have failed, you are running back to that institution to do what again? Are they going to turn back the season to reintroduce the outlook to you to now act? No. So it's a loss that is gone, and it's gone for good. They are now interested in supporting them with automatic weather stations to improve the collection of climate data, in order that this could also help improve the downscaling of, for example, outlooks, so that they are sharper and more focused to scale. This, I don't know, but it could add to something, but it doesn't change, because if you now see the network of databases that GMET relies on to collect its data, they have gone beyond this. Maybe for local purposes, fine, but they have gone beyond this level. And so we need to begin to sit and engage them to appreciate what kinds of assistance they really need to be on top of their work. And they are also saying that government is working to develop a resilience to climate conditions by rolling out irrigation and water management schemes. I think we've all been in this country and seen the One Village, One Dam initiative. When we were even in seasons where we had normal rainfall, most of these dams couldn't hold water beyond 1 month. And if you know the harsh conditions in the north, you realize that because of the high intensity of heat, water retention, you need receptacles or reservoirs that are huge enough to be able to buffer and then to take advantage of, to be able to buffer the heat and to retain enough moisture to last a longer while. None of those dams or dugouts really have that capacity. It means that the only other option that would have been available to address the drought, which is irrigation agriculture, is also hugely compromised. So the question of food shortage is not something that we can imagine is in doubt. We probably have to prepare. And so this was just how fine GMET was in giving the outlook. They said there will be late onset, go forward. So all the predictive models have come to pass. And I think we need to commend them for a great job done. Go on, go on, go on, go on. Yes. Again, beyond government's lack of responsiveness to the outlook that was shared by GMET, another area of policy lapse, in our considered opinion, has to do with the West Africa Food Systems Resistance Program, which Ghana is a part. I find that program really very novel, because it touches, if you look at all the components, they are really very good and they are fit for purpose. But the question one should ask himself is, the focus crops again, these are not the crops that we should be looking at if we are interested in food sovereignty. Go around this country and look at our food diversity. Let's explore more what it is that we know for as a matter of fact that our people eat. And not just take decisions around things that have commercial value but do not have value by way of food sovereignty. This country cannot proceed. If we have to develop, people must first feed well before all other things can fit in. If we get that wrong, nothing else would fit in. Again, if you look at government's policy, planting for food and jobs phase 2, you look at livestock, they're talking about poultry. But it is in doubt if the smallholders type of poultry is what they are looking at. They are looking at poultry like in the fashion of the Kwabena Dako type. You know, that is because it's more of the market-oriented. But food sovereignty is about what is it that our people themselves will eat. So I would have expected to see some constructive efforts to actually define some breeds of local poultry which are better adapted to our climate and which can withstand all the stresses and shocks of the extremes that we find ourselves, and to take those as a basis to support poultry. That would, for me, have been a good approach to food sovereignty. Again, if you look at the cereals and legumes that they are targeting, you don't see pearl millet there. You don't see cowpea there. You don't see agbadeya. I don't know what the English name for agbadeya is. It's another type of millet, widely eaten. In fact, a very important food security crop. I don't see it there. And there are many others that my colleagues up here in the north, from the north can attest to. They are not here. And so, how can we realistically talk about food sovereignty? Vegetables. We're talking about bira, ayoyo, kazaksa, alefu, many important things. This, our people, not many of our people eat this. So if we really want to target for food sovereignty, we probably may need to look beyond this. Because I can assure you, in my village, many people cook without tomatoes and onions. Pepper, because of the poor nature of our food, you need pepper to at least give some spice to the process. So maybe that could be true. But tomato and onion would not really make much of a difference in terms of food sovereignty. And so in terms of vegetables, one would have expected a more grounded approach, an approach that is founded on what our people truly eat. Again, you look at cassava, yam, and plantain. Not bad, but there are other important crops, like dundun bisa. I don't know the English name for it. Sweet potatoes, frafra potatoes. These are very important things that our people eat. So when we talk about food sovereignty, this might mean so much in terms of policy. But our policy, for me, appears to be at variance with the realities of our people when it comes to what? Food sovereignty. And so there's a need for us to reflect in all of this. So what are we saying? I think that the crisis that we find ourselves presently is on account of the fact that government did not take climate information services seriously. As far back as 2012, CARE International, in partnership with other NGOs in this country, implemented the Adaptation Learning Program. This was a program that rolled out what we call participatory scenario planning. It involved bringing multi-stakeholders to a common platform to share seasonal outlook from GMET and to have the departments of the Council for Scientific Industrial Research, like SARI and Co., to look at the outlook, advise farmers, develop joint advisories, and then get community facilitators to go down there and then disseminate information about what the outlook is and what the advisories are and what they can do about that. This was making a huge difference, but only as long as the project existed. When the project ended, the engagements with government to see how we could scale up this process didn't go that far. And here we are, faced with the same problem, with a solution that we've known in the past. Had we scaled up this process, had we taken up this model seriously and done something about it, I'm sure our farmers would have been better informed. They would have taken decisions that would have probably informed the kinds of adaptation measures they would have taken to adapt to this given situation. So please just go to the conclusion so that I end there. So in sum, what we are saying from the evidence that we gather is that the single season for crop production, which is adversely affected when there are long dry spells, accounts significantly for the high prevalence of food insecurity in the northern part of Ghana. And we're saying that the situation is exacerbated by poor attention to prioritizing climate information services, and that at the policy level, there's a need for us to have a relook at climate information services. If you look at private sector actors within this space, such as Isoko and Farmer Line, you see the farmers that are getting support from them. They were able to do something about this bad situation. And if you go to their farm fields, the story is completely different from what we have for the general populace. And so there is a need for us to look at climate information services very seriously. And we're also saying that the reactive rather than proactive measures that government takes in terms of policy response shouldn't be the way to go going forward. And we are saying also that food sovereignty cannot be guaranteed when policy is driven more by market considerations than the food security needs of the people. Food sovereignty must begin and end with people, not the market. Thank you very much.
Please, we can do better for Prof. Joseph Abazami. You know, around this time of day when people have had lunch, there is a way the body decides to do its own sovereignty. So we are going to step it up a bit with some panel discussion on very key issues. And because of time, we are going to merge that with a plenary session, even from what Prof has presented. So if you have questions from what Prof has presented, kindly take note of those questions. Right after the panel discussion, we'll get into that conversation for you. But you know what? Let me not waste time. Let's get to the chair, shall we? Okay. Okay. All right. So it's time for us to get into the conversation this afternoon. And there are quite a number of things that I'm sure that most of you have concerns about. And so we will be doing justice to all of that this afternoon right here. But quickly, let me introduce those who would be on the panel this afternoon. And in fact, when you look at the topic, you understand why we have these group of people joining us. And the topic for this afternoon is promoting agroecology through indigenous seed development as against GMOs, any health and existential implications. That's what we are looking at. And the first to join the panel would be Dr. Kwejo J.C. Santo. Please, let's clap for him. He is an agronomist from the University of Energy and Natural Resources. He is a lecturer at the Department of Horticulture and Crop Production at the School of Agriculture and Technology and he has written extensively on evaluation of yield and yield components of some cowpea. Please, Dr. Santo. We'll also have Dr. Andrew Limantol. He is from the University of Environment and Sustainable Development. Now, Doc is a lecturer at the Department of Water Resources and Aquaculture Management, and his PhD is in climate change and water resources. Ladies and gentlemen, let's receive Dr. Andrew Limantol. And also would have Dr. Alhassan Andani from the University for Development Studies. Now, Dr. Andani is an applied agricultural economist. He's also a senior lecturer and head of department at the Department of Food Security and Climate Change at the Faculty of Agriculture, Food and Consumer Sciences. Please, let's welcome Dr. Alhassan Andani. And because we don't want to have an all-male panel, we also have a smallholder woman farmer. Ladies and gentlemen, let's receive Aiza Rita Tenny. Yeah, so Rita will be joining us, have this conversation this afternoon. And in the next couple of minutes, we are going to make it very snappy so that we can take more of your questions. And my panelists are always ever ready to give some answers to those questions. And so, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Please, if you can just pass the microphones around, make sure that, I think there are some extra microphones just so that each panelist can have a microphone. So, yes, Justin, if you could help me. Great. So this afternoon, we are delving into the issue of agroecology and how we can promote that through indigenous seed development as against GMOs. And we are asking, the conversation has always been health implications and existential implications, and that's what this panel will be exploring this afternoon. So let me start quickly with you, Dr. Alhassan. Now, really, what would be the relationship between indigenous seeds and agroecology, and what is the current state of affairs in terms of availability of indigenous seeds?
Thank you.
Please, if there's any microphone, which is, okay. All right, Doc, you are live. It's on.
Okay. Thank you so much for the question. To the best of my knowledge, indigenous food crops, I would not limit it to seeds. Indigenous food crops generally are close to extinction because of the monoculture nature of food production engineered by the Green Revolution in the 1980s towards the 1990s. Belinda Gates and the organization promoted the cultivation of rice and other cereals to the neglect of those nutrient-dense crops that are indigenous to African communities.
Quite interesting. Now, in terms of the availability, you're saying that as it stands now, what does it look like for us?
Yes, some of them are still available.
Okay.
But they are stuck in the corners of indigenous farmers. And they are now more or less marginal crops that are not appropriately and then deliberately cultivated. In northern Ghana, for example, you find cowpea, pigeon pea that are used to mark the ends of farms and then to set out bounds on the farms instead of deliberately cultivating them as major crops. So they are there. You can think of sesame, which some NGOs are now promoting, but they are left in the hands of marginal farmers, including
Wow. Well, Dr. Kojo-Santo, let me come to you. Now, you have written about yield. And today, for instance, from the plenary session, we heard a question about how it is also a factor that these farmers are considering. for which reason most of them are moving away from indigenous seeds to the other seeds because of yield. How do we marry that? The concern of yield as against the need to go for the indigenous seeds. Please, if there's another microphone, yes. Yes, and let's leave the microphones on.
All right, thank you very much for the opportunity. I want to make some clarification before I can start. With this kind of cease, I don't think we are supposed to talk about only grains. From the agronomic point of view, it should include other plants like cassava, yam, potatoes, and even aquatic organisms. I don't know whether I'm making sense to the public. Now, with the issue of yield and indigenous seed development, we all know that our indigenous crops adapt very well to our local soil and climatic conditions. They do it because they have a particular kind of growth habit. Now, with science and tech, we now have different hybrids with different ecological requirements, different growth habits. That is where the issue is coming from. Now, hybrids are heavy feeders. They require a lot of fertilizer application, a lot of protection from pests, insect pests, rodents, weeds, and other pests. Which means that when such hybrids are grown, their management levels are very high. So let us ask ourselves, how many farmers can afford the high cost of these inputs? Inputs in the form of fertilizers, pesticides, such as weedicides, insecticides, and the rest. Now, because of this, anytime we grow the hybrids, the farmers are unable to procure these farm inputs. Their crops do not do well up to expectation. I want to give a typical example in maize production. We can take Pana 12, Lake 601, and the rest. In the event of drought, these crops are highly destroyed by the fall armyworm. Why so? Because of their high nutritional content. You know, pests are like humans. They like what is good. They like what is palatable. So these crops attract these insect pests. So at the end of the day, if the farmer is unable to control these pests, the farmer wouldn't get anything. However, someone who grows our OPVs, the open pollinated varieties, may get a better yield than the person who grows the hybrid. Telling us clearly that our local crops can adapt better to prevailing environmental conditions than the hybrids. Thank you.
Please, let's clap for him. And because the conversation has always been, and in fact, the literature I have read points to the fact that the hybrid produces more. But you are giving us a different dimension, that the hybrid also attracts more pests as compared to our OPV. So we have a situation where now, if you are going for the hybrid, you stand that risk more than someone who is doing their OPVs. Please, you can, that microphone, I think when it's on, it can help. Yes.
You see, agriculture is all about us.
Okay.
Whatever we do is about us. Look, with these hybrids, when it comes to planting, the recommendation is that we plant one seed per hill or per hole, with a recommended spacing. Now we have undertaken some studies, and I can boldly say that it is all about you varying the rate of fertilizer application. It's a matter of you managing weeds. Generally, it's a matter of you doing what you're supposed to do at the right time. The moment you do that, you get the expected yield.
Okay.
You see, I don't want to say much. Otherwise, it may sound something else.
Okay.
But that's the reality. We need to love our local varieties. And even if we are going for hybrids, I would advise we pay much attention to our local hybrids.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Because they do far better than the foreign hybrids.
Yes. Okay. Right. So let me come to Rita and find out. So what has the experience been when you are looking at our indigenous crops, our indigenous seeds, as compared to farming with the hybrids? What's really the difference? Oh, please, can we get the microphone for Rita? Rita, use mine. It's on.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to air out. In fact, looking at our indigenous seed, it's far better than the foreign hybrid or whatever. I'm just using myself as a practical example. I'm a farmer in the Upper East region. I used to farm anyhow, but it got to some time that when I had the education and the trainings, advocacies given to us, capacity buildings, I started adapting that into my field. So sometime I would divide the portions, plant this way for the hybrid and the other way for my indigenous. As time goes on, if I don't get the foreign chemicals to apply on the foreign hybrid, I won't get yield. But using my indigenous residues to do compost and apply it on my indigenous seed, I get yield. So I started practicing that. And even last year, I was awarded as a best crop farmer through my indigenous district. So I prefer the indigenous way, because one day I sat up and asked myself, now that we are always demanding that they should bring us GMO from anywhere, what if one day the provider fails us? What are we going to do? Are we going to sleep hunger? Or where are we getting that to work on our farms? And we have nothing to do apart from our farming activities in the north. So I started talking to my women how to adopt our indigenous seed back instead of the foreign GMO. The insemination of the seed will gradually affect us. We may not see it today, but as time goes on, when we still practicing it, it will not be easy for our health status, and our soil fertility too will lose. And our animals are not also safe. So to me, I think indigenous seed is far better than the hybrid we're talking of today.
Okay, and that's from an award-winning farmer, not me, a lame farmer. Please, let's clap for Rita one more time. So let me introduce Dr. Limantel into the conversation. Doc, now, When we talk of the local seeds, how do they support resilient agricultural systems compared to the use of GMOs?
So let me say that we have the indigenous seeds that are climate resilient, and others are not. For the hybrid, for me, my observation is because it came about because of climate change. The frequency of climate extremes, drought, and then flood. Normally, for what I know, most part of Ghana is because of the drought. For instance, the maize that we know, that we used to farm in the north, the best time it should be tasseling is in, August. So the drought effect we are talking about is because of the drought spell in August. And I think that those in the north will observe, they will see that over maybe around 20 years now, we now begin to be having some kind of drought spell in the August. I was a farmer, and I think 2016, I farmed maize, and in August, I was on my knee spray every day for 1 week. And I invested 10,000, and I got 4,000 in return. And since then, I've never farmed. So, for me, the hybrid came because of this effect. And it's, for instance, especially for the north. But if you have something like sorghum, which my brother mentioned, so sorghum is very good because no matter what happened, even if we don't have rain throughout the whole of August, it will survive. Things like beans, it will survive. Things like neri, I think they also have. He didn't mention something. I thought when they were talking about vegetable, I thought they mentioned bra. Bra is more cherished in Upper East region, and that's his own place. And I got to Upper East, and I got to know that what do you call it? Baba? No, not Baba. The local Dawadawa, what's the name? Dawadawa tree. Dawadawa tree was so important. Because of that, farmers do not cut Dawadawa, even as we speak today, except in extreme cases, they want to get charcoal, they cut it down. They don't cut it because it's very important. And I was told in the Upper East region that Bra and Dawadawa were what they survive on during drought seasons. We are not saying that droughts are new. Drought has been with a Stone Age. Floods has been with a Stone Age. But the frequency with which it occurs these days is due to climate change. We are not saying that we don't have drought or there were no existence. All of this exist. But today, when we complain of climate change, it is because of the frequency of this extreme event. And that's what we are now seeing in the north. And as he mentioned, they will continue. It won't stop. And so when he was mentioning the policy of government, I think that we don't even need to wait on GMET. We need to know that these are things that will continue. So the hybrid ones were made for a short period so that it doesn't enter into May, what do you call it, August. Even if you enter August, then you should be thinking about its maturity. That was the reason. But now we have our growing season shrinking. In the north, when I started growing up, the rains will start in April and will end in, October. These days, the rains start in May, June, and to be ending of September, or maybe early part of, October. And again, within it, there's going to be drought spell, which is August. So the hybrid was made to survive that kind of short period. But now, all of them are failing. And I think that we should go back for the local seeds. And probably not concentrating on maize, but things like sorghum and beans, cassava, other ones like this, the people now like soya beans, which is used for this pottery. Because if you don't do that, we need to survive, and you crop what you can harvest. If you crop and you can't harvest, like what's happened in the north, you mentioned it. If that farm sorghum, there wouldn't be that problem we are talking about. But most of the people, especially in the north, do not cherish sorghum anymore. So I should say that the habit came because of drought, but it's not more, we are not seeing it now being sustainable, and so we should adapt some of the drought resilient crops like sorghum, maybe sorghum beans, cassava. Jams are now also failing it because jams have to also mature in August. And these are issues that I think we should be looking at.
And for me, looking at all that you have said, it poses a source of worry. It makes me feel that we need to take urgent steps now, else we have a catastrophe ahead of us.
All data shows that climate, I think someone mentioned that last year, let's say COP 29, which is coming this year, you hear, I know that I'm not seeing, I was happy for the lab COP. They decided that they were going to do something which we talk about, lowering financing to fossil fuel. I am not too optimistic about that. And it means that at the mitigation level, we are not going far.
Okay.
So the data that we know and the projections that we project, it to show that the effects of climate change will continue for long.
Dr. Andani, now looking at these effects and the reason why people are dashing to GMOs as against indigenous seeds, are there health implications, or we are perhaps just making a mountain out of a molehill?
Yes, thanks so much. I think the health implications are huge. GMO, for example, depends largely on chemicals. And the use of chemicals will sink into the seeds or the product. And when consumed by human, eventually it will impact negatively on the health. It is also harmful in the sense that our soil, because of the continuous use of chemicals, will be eroded, and erosion can easily set in. Nutrients will be lost, and eventually it will lead to serious food shortages, which can cause malnutrition among members of the society.
Wow. So if you are here and you are considering GMO, after hearing this, do you still want to go there? Now, let me come to you, Dr. Santo, and I want to find out, like Doc mentioned earlier, the effects of climate change. It looks like we are doing the advocacy, but then we still see its impact. So putting the two sets of seeds together, GMOs, indigenous seeds, how do each of them perform under the ravages of the climate that we see?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. It depends on the locality in which the farmer finds himself or herself. With the foreign hybrids, I must emphasize that not all of them do well in all agroecologies. I remember sometime last 2 years, UNEL undertook some studies with IFDC Ghana. And we saw a lot of yield differences among the different agroecologies in the country. Why am I saying this? With the foreign hybrids, as I said earlier, their input requirements are very high. So not quite too long, Doc mentioned that they have some health implications. I want to lay much emphasis on that before I can continue. When we go to the rural communities, where farming is largely practiced, we know how these farmers undertake the activities. When it comes to application of pesticides, sometimes these farmers carry their knapsack sprayers and the chemicals to the water bodies to fill their tanks. What happens? Some of the droplets get into the water bodies. It affects aquatic life. Human beings take the water, it affects humans as well. Even if we don't take the water, because we have aquatic organisms in the water, we eat them, and indirectly, we get those chemicals into our bodies. Some of these farmers wash their containers, they use containers and use them as reservoir of food ingredients, or they even use them as drinking cups, not considering the residual effects of the chemicals. What happens? So, at the end of the day, if the farmer is not healthy, how does the farmer continue to grow crops or rear animals? I don't know whether I'm making sense to the public. In situations where the farmers spray their crops against pests without protecting themselves, what happens to their body? There are some areas in the country where there are serious health implications, especially when it comes to the reproductive system. What are we doing about it? If these farmers have issues with their health, how do they produce? Can they even determine what to produce, how to produce, and when to produce, and even how much to produce? So food sovereignty cannot be spoken about. Now, adding insult to injury, these inputs are very expensive. And we are talking about peasant farmers, small-scale farmers. How many of them can afford the high cost of these inputs? So at the end of the day, what will happen is that they will stop farming and be looking for other opportunities. And that is why of late we have issues of this kind of black galamsey and yellow galamsey, as somebody said in the morning.
Right.
Yes. Because they don't have the seed capital to start. No springboard for them. And we know the youth of today. Everything is quick. They are looking for quick monies. So they have to do something which will give them some monies within the shortest period of time.
Right.
So, personally, I think we should go for the indigenous seeds with minimum input requirements. It is all about proper management, proper timing of recommended agronomic practices. The moment we do that, we are good to go.
Right.
You see, if we don't change ourselves, if we don't change the way we do things, we shouldn't expect anyone to take us out of our Egyptian conditions. Now, gradually, we are throwing away our culture. I don't know whether I'm making sense.
How so, Doc?
Yes, because seeds are highly symbolic of our cultural heritage. As we speak, and somebody is here, the person doesn't even know amaranthus.
I don't know.
Somebody doesn't know egushi. Even granite.
If you don't know granite, then you are.
It will surprise you to know that somebody can ask whether cassava is a subterranean crop or not.
Right.
Yes. So gradually, our culture is eroding. So what do we have to show to our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren in future? That is what we should be thinking about.
Okay. Okay. And it's quite interesting we are talking about that because we are talking about the ravages of galamsey, what galamsey has done to fields, and the fact that Doc mentioned something. Everybody wants quick money. And that's how come we are also welcoming quick death. People are dying at very young ages because of that desire. But the question I want to ask Rita is, how then do we carry the advocacy from the boardrooms, from the conference rooms, to the people on the grounds to let them know that this is the way to go? Rita, how do we encourage farmers to opt for the indigenous seeds when they can see that when they cut corners and go other ways, maybe it will be easier for them to get quicker yields faster? How do we discourage them and encourage them to pick up the indigenous seeds?
Thank you very much.
This one.
What we can do to encourage them to practice our indigenous way of farming is, one, through advocacies, sensitization in the community level, and demonstrated fields. As I did some years back, when I started it, it wasn't easy, especially the compost farm. That one you will not get immediate yield, but as time goes on, you will get good yield. That is why it was last year that I had my award. So whilst doing the practical work with the people and telling them the effects, the harmful effects that we are going to encounter in future, definitely change will come.
Right. Well, Dr. Limanto, is it a case of ignorance or, like Prof said, the 3 C's? Corruption, confusion, and which one? Connection. Is that what is affecting this sector also, Dr. Limanto? Or people just don't know?
In terms of awareness, or what are you saying?
Yes. I'm talking about like GMOs and indigenous seeds. Is it that people don't know why they should go for the indigenous seeds? Or perhaps people are really strong arming and introducing these GMOs, and that is what is making people uptake it?
So I think one other way is, I think I was in Germany,
okay,
and you go to the shop, and the label one organic, and label other one, what do you call it? Inorganic. And the inorganic is very cheap, and organic is expensive, but it has some significance. People who want good health, they go for that one. If you know you want to gamble with your life, you go for the what they call organic. I think that would be one way to. Virtually, our farmers themselves are not. They are not educated. Even when we say they are giving us organic, what do you call it, food. I think in what do you call Walwali, the Fulanis tie their what they call cattle, and where they put them, they make sure they rotate them within around 7 months, rotate them within the farm where they are going to, so they plant there. And I wanted to buy beans. So someone told me I should buy from them because they did, and so they don't buy those beans. We have very nice beans. Look at it, very attractive, but most people there don't like it because they talk, as I mentioned, they spray a lot. If you have sprayed a crop, it means a lot. It means putting some chemicals inside it. That is a fact. So maybe if we can educate our farmers and then get to understand that, maybe also finding out how we can label them, then I think that we encourage people to like it. Once something is liked, I think that we'll go in more for cultivation. Okay. Because if the indigenous ones, as I mentioned, will have good market, why won't our people do it? So maybe also policy, I don't know how to do it, but policy to, or maybe policy with advocacy, so that we help them label these crops, and they are sold differently from others, then to encourage them to do that. When he mentioned agushi, I was shaking my agushi, so nice, but I think agushi is virtually venison. Agushi, you have also another one to call nere. Nere is also one, and then there's another small ones. These are things that if you go to the market somewhere, they're very expensive to buy. In our local homes, it's very cheap because they don't know the value. People eat it because thing is of good health. So if you are able to help them, they label this, and we're able to give good market, people will begin patronizing the indigenous food.
Ladies and gentlemen, please, let's hear it for the panelists. And I'm sure that you have 3,644,000 questions to ask them. So please, now we are opening the floor for questions. If you do have a question, you put your hand up, we give you a microphone, and then you can ask your questions. So I've seen one hand here. So we'll take batches of 3 questions, and then we'll come for responses. So if we could get a microphone to them. Yes, thank you very much. So please, you can introduce yourself and then pose your question.
All right, my name is Rashid Salifu from the Upper West region. I'm a member of Activista Ghana.
Okay, Rashid.
Yes, I heard about the issue of the pests affecting the maize. If you go to the Sisala area, those who are into commercial farming, most of the times goes for the hybrid maize. And some of them, they've given testimonies of higher yield more than the indigenous seeds. Now, I did 5 acres, and I went in for the indigenous seeds. Someone who is closer to me also have the hybrid seeds. Now, if you go to the farm, you realize that you cannot differentiate between my indigenous maize and the hybrid maize because they all look the same. And I'm telling you that I'll get more high yield more than the person. But most of the times, when you go to some people, the hybrid give them more yield, more than the indigenous one. So, but when the rain stops at a point, I realized that my maize was affected with the army worm. Okay. So I don't know whether, but I have heard dogs saying that probably it affects most of the time with the hybrid. So why is it that my maize too was affected with the army worm?
Okay. Thank you, Rashid. We'll take 2 more before we come. Please, if you can pass the microphone to... So, Kwesi, we'll come to you, but there are 2 people behind you who raised their hands first. Then I'll add yours to it, and then we can quickly get the answers. All right. So, yes, Prof. Yes, Prof has a question.
Okay.
But we are supposed to be asking you questions too.
I'm hoping for that, yes.
Right, Prof.
Yeah, I think my question goes to my colleague from UNE. I think the issue of the vigor of indigenous seeds was highlighted earlier. You know, it is really an issue that undermines our reliance on it. And so, those of you within that space, what are you doing to ensure there is consistency in the vigor? In the way that our farmers will know over time lose confidence in using it. Yeah.
All right.
Oh, thank you. My name is Adam.
Okay.
From Urbanet. Mr. Moderator, I have a problem with the way you are using interchangeable GMOs and hybrid.
Okay.
Which is that they are totally different, to my understanding.
Okay.
The GMOs are more like those that are genetically modified.
Modified, yes.
For example, if the issue about the armyworm, GMOs can come out with a variety that is resistant to the armyworm only, or a particular pest that is prevalent in any area. They can come out with a genetically modified crop that can withstand that, or even drought. That is how the GMO. But the hybrid is just more like when they cross the open ventilated varieties and some improved variety to come out of one that is maybe also just to improve the yield.
Okay.
So maybe let's be careful the way we use the tool. But I also have a question for Dr. Santo regarding the issue of, in terms of the yield difference between indigenous and the hybrid. I know there are a lot of publications that has proven that most hybrids, in terms of yield difference, are higher. There are a lot of publications on that. That is why most of the times we, the NGOs, when we are implementing a project and we are focusing on productivity, we go for the hybrid or the improve. But the more reason about the indigenous seeds is also about we not being able to maintain the seed. Like what you said about the difference between a seed and a grain is because if you look at the research institutions, the focus is on the improved seeds or the hybrid seeds. That is where their attention is. So they produce more seed on that. They breed with the foundation seed. That is the level of generation that it comes through. With the foundation seed, then we get to the certified seed. So more attention is focused on that. But with the indigenous, a lot of them are farmer-safe seeds. And when you continue to use it after some time, it's going to lose the germination percent or in terms of the purity. That is why maybe I think that this is a very important conference that ActionAid is leading, that we should spend more attention on research and development in the area of indigenous seeds so that the research institutions can begin to see how we can develop that seed system with the indigenous so that farmers who are using the indigenous seeds can also begin to see an improved yield. Maybe this is just what I also want to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kwesi has one. So right after Kwesi, okay, Prof, we'll come back to you. So, but let's do Kwesi and then get responses from the panelists.
Thank you very much, moderator, and thank you, my brother. You took the sail out of my wind. But let me start this way. Technology is good, and technology is evolving. When I left the university 23 years ago, we were using overhead projectors. So the lecturer will come, Professor Eisen and Professor Hansen, they will come with their slides. Is it translucent or transparent slides? And now we are nowhere near that. In fact, now we are talking about smart classrooms. It has evolved. It's been improving, and it will improve, and it continue to improve. I think for such a forum, it is important that we also take the opportunity to educate people. I will not pretend to be a professor, as it's full of professors and academia. But like my brother said, hybrid seeds are not GMOs. And I think we need to be very clear on that so we don't mix them, because I noticed that there's a mixture of all that. Two, I would like Madam to tell me later in a response where she sources her seeds from, the seeds that she uses, where does she buy them from. But then again, maybe probably tomorrow we'll get the chance to probably talk more on that. But yes, GMOs, the way it emerged, had issues, but over the period, it's getting better. You can replant them now. In fact, the cowpea that they mentioned, what SARI is producing now, from what we have been told, the farmers spray less than, I don't want to say the indigenous one, but whatever variety they were planting compared to whatever they've done now. So there's improvement, but more critically, whatever we've done or we do, we use our local scientists. Nothing comes from outside that we are supposed to rubber stamp and say, let it go out. And even with that, once the National Biosafety Authority has approved any variety, it doesn't end there. It goes through PPRSD of MOFA, which does the varietal release, and also they do their own risk assessment and certification and testing analysis all together. So it's a complete rigorous system. In fact, let me say that it is why an agency like mine has been set up to regulate the space and make sure that whatever comes out with our seal or the seal of the MBA is foolproof and can start the test of time. However, like any technology, there can be issues. There's road accidents every day, but we never stop boarding cars. But the cars, or the Bedford of 1990-something, or even a Ford vehicle, is not what we're having now. the electronics, the steering, whatever has changed. And I think as time goes on, it's this kind of form that makes sure that we change or we improve on whatever is there. So please, hybrid seeds are not GMOs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kwesi. So we'll take responses, then we'll come back for the next batch. So there's been question on yield. Rashid said he doesn't understand why he uses indigenous seeds, and then armyworm infestation rather came on his farm compared to his neighbor who was, Rashid, was it GMO or hybrid? Hybrid seeds, please. So anyone can take. Yes. Microphone, please. All right. So there are two questions on yield.
All right, thank you very much. I don't know if you closely followed my communication. I never mentioned GMO.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was mentioning hybrids, then indigenous seeds. And I have my reasons for that. So all along, I was also thinking to make a clear difference between the two. But once you have mentioned it, I'll be silent on it. Mr. Rashid, if you closely followed what I said, I don't think this question wouldn't have come up. Because I said the hybrids are more prone to the fall armyworm than the indigenous seeds. I never said fall armyworm cannot attack indigenous seeds. Please, is it clear to you? Very good. Now, if you also remember very well, I made it clear to the audience that the hybrids respond hugely to external inputs. So their requirement for fertilizer is high. Their requirement for pesticides is also very high. Now, because there are variations in nutrient requirements, of course, the amount of the nutrient you have in the crop residue will also be high. I don't know whether I'm making sense to you. So if it happens that you apply huge quantities of nitrogen to your maize plant, and at the end of the day, you have high levels of it in the crop residue, of course, the pest is going to feed on that. So that is where the variation will come from. I don't know whether I'm making sense to you.
Right.
Now, Prof, you also raised a very nice concern.
Consistency.
In line with how we're going to maintain the vigor of our local varieties. Please, I hope I'm right. Very good. I want to link that with what Uncle said. Chief, please, the name again. Very good. When it comes to certified seed production, we know that one is being undertaken by trained people or by experts. Now let's come to the farm level. How many farmers know much about selection of planting materials for our next batch of planting? That is where we need to lay much emphasis on. I believe that research institutions, including universities and crop research institute, should come together to train farmers and extension officers on some of these things. Right at the seedling level, vegetative stage, reproductive stage, and at the maturity stage. We have to steady the crops. Because you can have a whole field for seed production. But the point is, not all the growing plants will be qualified to be selected. But is that the situation or the case? No. Once we are saying that this field is for seed production, then we harvest everything, which is wrong. And that is what the farmers do. So, after you have established the field, you need to monitor the crops closely at the young stage, at the infant stage. Then at the flowering stage, you continue to study them and know those crops which are really doing well. Then you mark or identify them. At maturity, what happens? Still there will be variations. Then you still identify such ones. Even at the point of harvesting, there will still be some differences. You have to still observe them and identify them. Those which will qualify for selection are those which will be favored for the next production. And the moment we take farmers through this in a participatory research, I think the right thing will be done. And I think in the long run, our local varieties will far outperform the hybrids, the foreign hybrids, because we have local hybrids and foreign hybrids. And the local hybrids are doing very well. Thank you very much.
And for Rita, Kwesi says after the session, you tell him where you source your seeds so that he can do a follow-up. But please, we are taking our next batch of questions. Please, let's keep it very crisp, and then the answers also very short so that we would not spend way too much time here. So one question here, one from Prof at the back, and the other from my brother there, and then we'll add Dolores to it. So 4. Yes, Prof, so please, yes.
All right, thank you very much, Kojo. My input first goes to Prof. Prof, you mentioned the GMET information, and the question you ask is if the information was put out as early as May 2024, what did we do with it? Or what did government, to quote you rightly. So if we ask what did government do with it, what did we do with it as academicians? What did we do with it? So then boils down to the issue of collaboration. As Prof said, connection, that will lead to collaboration. How did we use the information that GMED gave out to possibly educate the people or to possibly work with? And so did we do any follow-up to find out so that we can do that? So we can also look at that. I am whipping both sides. So I begin with us as academicians. We needed to do better with the information so that we'll be able to. And then again, it comes back to us as academicians. How is our community service to the people of the town or of the area? So once we get the information, what effort did we make on our own to say that this is what has been put out, what do we do with it, or this is how we go by it? When we do that, we will then be taking the gown to town. The next one is the issue of indigenous food crop. I was discussing with CD. I said it is our lack of attention. It is our lack of attention. It looks to us that everything is lost. But some of us think that what we think is lost is there. We need to focus our attention on it, look for them, and be intentional about what we do. So I said we should be deliberate in our cultivation, and then we should also look further for. Maybe I will leave it here for others to come. Otherwise, I was going to talk about the local hybrids.
Very well. Thank you so much, Prof. 2 more questions. I think, yes, ma'am, please kindly bring it to... Right, so to him and then to you, and then we'll wrap with Dolores.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Ben Guri.
Yes.
I was happy to see this panel here. Very academic in their debates. And I think I was among some of the pioneers of the fight against GMOs in Ghana. We did so hard, as civil society in particular, and farmers, fought so hard to stop the passing of the law for GMOs. But today, I think it's passed. The law is passed, and I think the president even extended the law, which means that GMOs are in town. They are here with us. But from listening to the panel, I got the idea that GMOs definitely go along with some health risks. These are the things we raised at the time, and then it was kind of ignored. So how do we deal with it? Now, if we know that the GMOs have health risks and it's in town, how do we deal with it? Because today, if it's already there in the market and there are all these so-called good things that people are still going to buy the seeds and propagate it, and it will spread in town. And at the end of the day, probably even pollute our local seeds. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. So, yes, so Dolores and then my brother there.
One of the questions I was going to ask is what the last speaker just said.
Fantastic.
So I'll jump that one. My other one is on what one of the speakers spoke about on how some of these things affect us in our health-wise. That to the extent that when you go to the Western world, you get to see organic foods and inorganic foods on the shelf. I think we have to intentional, as Prof said, let me use the word intentional, find a way to market our produce that we do. You know, in our Ghanaian setup, you go and everything is there. They don't even tell you the genetic factor of the things. So you see tomato, you just buy because I went to the market to buy. But if it starts from all of us here, where we do the advocacy to our supermarket, to our shops, to our local market, you go and there are two sets of tomatoes. This one is organic tomato. This one is inorganic tomato. It is the choice of the buyer to buy.
Effective labeling.
Exactly.
Right.
So that you, the buyer, will know that you are either buying something good for your health and your family or the other one. So I think it is something we have to look at very well. Now, another question. I don't know if EPA is here, because I know they were part of the people to be here. My question is on the chemicals that comes into the country. We are all crying of inorganic chemicals in the system now, which is giving us a lot of sicknesses because Africa or Ghana was very far from kidney, heart failure, and all those things, but now it is with us. It stays with us now. So some of the chemicals we use for our production in the agricultural sector, it is being produced or it is being brought into the system and it is being supervised or certified by the EPA that is good for the environment and all that we are doing. So the very ones that are not good, are they able to give us the data year by year? Do we go to the website and see? Do we know that whether these ones are very harmful to human nature? Do we know that how is it affecting the crops that we are doing? Because sometimes they spray the tomato in the morning, in the evening they are bringing it to the market because it's a market day. The person wants to make money. And you, the buyer, don't know. You also buy and go and cook for your family. The next thing is somebody has hole in hearts in the family. So some of these things are are things that we really, really need to let Ghanaians, or we all have to know,
right,
because we are all key players in it. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final one from my brother at the back. Yes.
I think I've also been a farmer, but now being here has taken me away from the farm. So I think this fall armyworm, I don't know really, but some of us, we started hearing and seeing fall armyworm around 2016-17. I don't know whether it had been there before then, or it was from that those few years that it just emerged. That is the wider scale. I'm from a farming area, the Sala area, as I just earlier spoke. And we never knew fall armyworm. And when PFJ, this issue of hybrid seed and the rest, you know, it was Planting for Food and Jobs, which introduced the hybrid seed and the rest, that we started seeing this things. So I don't know whether really it is this introduction of the hybrid seeds and the rest that really brought in the fall armyworm, or it had been there with us. And that is what is making me subscribe to the point that it is more susceptible and highly vulnerable really to, impact of fall armyworm than let's say the OPVs.
Right.
But for me, there's also something we need to really clarify here. our conception of the indigenous seed. When we say indigenous seed, are we referring to indigenous as in something that is community level, or even if development of seed systems within Ghana, it means it still classifies as indigenous? Because you see that sometimes we're talking about community seed banks. That means you want to have seed developed for a community so that they can easily get it and pass it on to each other. For those things, they could be good, but the issue is whether they are run through the right protocols and supervised, and such that, as we're talking about the seed being so viable, because what are the production mechanisms, what are the storage mechanisms, and then for it to become, redistributed for use. So it is important that we emphasize some of these conversations. For me, I look at it as in Ghana because I reflect at 2020 when COVID emerged. Those of us who are in the farming distance, 2020, the issue of the hybrid seed, those lake and then the pana and those things you were referring to, they could not be imported. You remember COVID, nothing could come into Ghana. Even fertilizers could not come in. Farmers struggled to even have fertilizer, to even apply to their farms. That was why farmers went back, going to look for their poultry droppings and all of that. And so, and the disappointment for us as an organization that promotes agroecology is when even the PFJ comes, we pushed and pushed and pushed. Government said they've included organic fertilizer options, but it's never made, there's no support. Right. Well, that's what we're talking about, shifting the finance. The finance is still being channeled to the importation of the chemical fertilizer and distributed to the farmers. What are the organic input options that they are really making accessible to the farmers? These are the concerns that we have. And so those are the issues that we need to really push hard on the advocacy. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. So let me come back to my panel here. So effective labeling, Doc, my brother also talked about the issues regarding the hybrid seeds and all of that. In fact, he's asking, what do we describe as indigenous in the first place? My father here also raised some concerns. And then, Prof, we'll come to the questions that you have to answer. All right, so to the panelists, anyone?
Thank you very much. Indigenous seeds are seeds that were given to us by our culture heritage. The seeds that we came to meet and the seeds that we're supposed to use. Whilst the hybrid seed too are the seeds that are being imported to our communities for us to adopt.
Yeah, on the issue of the health implications, I think there was a concern about that. As to how, in fact, it was about how do you manage the two regimes of seeds. GMO, because GMO law has been passed, and our indigenous seeds. Serious advocacy activities would make Ghanaians fall in love for the indigenous seeds. Some of the indigenous crops, for example, they appear inferior, and that has played down the consumption of side crops. The PMP, for example, is very nutritious. It's like beans. But the youth today are shying away from it. Sometimes I take it at my breakfast. You bring it home and your children will not even look at it. So if we try to feed our children in school through the school feeding program, some of these indigenous food crops, I think they will live and grow to like it in the future. And that can help the indigenous foods compete favorably with the imported ones. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Adding to what he said we can also establish seed production centers across the country. Then we also have seed banks. So we can have on-farm seed banks at the household, community, and village levels. Then we have ex-situ seed banks at the national, regional, and global levels. Then we have what we call in-situ seed banks or soil seed banks. So over here, our planting materials have direct contacts with natural forces. So you have a farm, then let's assume it is a cassava farm. So you keep those cassava plants purposely for multiplication. So you harvest the sticks as and when necessary. Then we make sure that we supervise all these centers and seed banks closely to ensure that they are quite successful. Thank you very much.
So we'll take an answer from Prof.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chancellor, for that very important question. Yeah, I think it's a very fair question. Charity begins at home. And so what do we as academics even do in this regard before going forward to blame government? And luckily for me, there is a lot of evidence I have here by way of people who can testify to our efforts in this front. I, for example, was the consultant that did the midterm review of the CDF's 4 agri-nutrient stewardship project in Ghana. This was a project that looked at fertilizer application, right rate, right time, right source, and all that. You know, and they are focused in the northeast, eastern corridor of this country. During the midterm, one key thing I identified was that, look, all the good things they are doing, they don't integrate climate information services into what they are doing. The project is likely to fail. Because everything that they are doing is timed based on the climate. And that was one good saver of that project, because when they integrated climate information services, Global Affairs Canada was really very, very excited. And a recommendation was made that I should again be made to do the final evaluation. I just finished doing that last month of the project. So that's one example. Maxwell Amedi, who is here, is a colleague or a panel member of the Nature-Based Climate Solutions Project of Farm Radio International. We have been having what we call on-air dialogue sessions. So in Northern Ghana, we sit on a number of radio stations where we disseminate these advisories that are issued by GMET. Again, Action Aid Ghana, my good friend here is here. We did the midterm review of the Northern Ghana Integrated Development Project. One of our key recommendations was the integration of CIS into what they are doing. And they will testify that it made a great difference for the project. And so at our own level, we are doing, but it's just a drop in the ocean. We would need that lift where there is that political will to drive that process. And I think that we have the right expertise, the right infrastructure to support the process. What is missing is just that political connection that will get all of this running. So thank you very much, sir.
Please, shall we put our hands together for Prof. as well as my panelists? And please, let's do one more time for all of you who have made sure that we've had this conversation. And my panelists, let me acknowledge them once again. Dr. Kwejo Jesse Santo, University of Energy and Natural Resources. Doc, thank you so much. Dr. Andrew Limantol, University of Environment and Sustainable Development. Doc, we appreciate you. And Dr. Alhassan Andani, University for Development Studies. Doc, thank you. And of course, my very good friend, award-winning farmer, Aiza Rita Tene, smallholder woman farmer. Please, let's give it up for them as they take their seats. Kwesi is a de facto panelist. Today he's taking over the conversation. Quick one, Kwesi, because we need to go. Yes. Quick.
I heard that a GMO law has been passed. We do not have a GMO law. Please. And Dr. Andani, we do not have a GMO law. And I think we are learning. And fortunately, on your part, you have students that you are teaching. What we have is a biosafety law, part of which includes certifying the kind of labs that you do your biosafety and biotechnology work. It's not a GMO law, please. So, please, we don't have a GMO law. It's a component of what the law or the act states, but it's not GMO law. Thank you.
Okay, so that's Kwesi from the National Biosafety Authority. Kwesi, thank you so much. Now, yes, Eugenia, please briefly.
Thank you, Kwesi. I just need a clarification on that because I know that we did a press statement when the law was passed on some selected GMOs that the country was. Yeah. Thank you.
Is that national? Yes.
I need.
And which are things that before you import, you need certification. So they're already only registering so that if any importer is bringing those varieties here, they would have gotten certification. So what we put out there was for grains, not seeds.
Okay. Yes, HOP.
Thank you. I think we shouldn't preempt things.
Right.
Because it's indeed one of the reasons why we introduce a specific topic for regulators. Tomorrow, we'll deal with that and handle it effectively. So let's pause here and then we can go home because we started early.
Right, thank you very much. Because what we also do know is that is the National Biosafety Act 2011, that's the parents' law that allows for the importation of GMO foods into the country. But ladies and gentlemen, at this particular point, we'll take closing remarks from our very distinguished chair. Please, let's give it up and welcome Prof to give us his remarks. Please, let's keep clapping for Prof till Prof gets here.
Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Instead of 3 C's, you get a story about 3 men. These 3 men ate a stolen goat. And they all came to agreement that the whole thing should remain secret. So whilst they were sitting with other community members, one of them was so happy about the job they did, then he said, "Let me go and drink water on top." Then the second man, who was part of the plan, said, but you people said it should remain a secret. Then the third person said, but he did not disclose the name of the goat. So the community member who lost the goat was able to realize that these 3 men did the job. But the question I want to ask you is that the first guy who said, let me go and drink water on top, and the second man who said, you people said it should remain a secret, and the last person who said he did not disclose the name of the goat, who among these people revealed the secret? Who? The third person. The second one. Okay, so you see that is a problem about galamsey in Ghana. It's very difficult to tell who is not letting it be solved. But I can assure you from these discussions the papers we have presented, and the plenary sessions, we are making a headway. And I want to agree with ActionAid that from the words of Chinua Achebe, that we don't gather in the moonlight in the village ground for nothing. When we gather, we are gathering as kinsmen for a reason. So we are here for a reason, and I'm sure that today we have really discussed and then shared one or two ideas about the way forward. Ladies and gentlemen, when the CD took the stage, he said a lot of things, but I picked just 4 of them. He emphasized the need for agroecology, and he underscored why we should be an agroecology nation, because that is more sustainable. Then he encouraged and gave us evidence of some banks now trying to diversify their funding, from fossil fuels, industrial agriculture, now to agroecology. And he recommended or called upon the banks to do more. He also touched on indigenous seeds, the need for us to promote that. Our sister from the Dutch embassy gave a very nice picture. When I listened to her submission, I realized that the indigenous seed is really something that ActionAid should be taken up seriously. Especially so when the Dutch embassy is thinking of establishing grain banks. It's very important. She stressed the need to have quality seeds, how we can prepare or develop them, how we can store them, and how we can distribute. So she's already telling us a kind of value chain in the seed industry. And I remember I was having a workshop with the members of parliament some 2 years ago on a budget. And we realized that Ghana is importing a lot of seeds. And that is very dangerous. So if we really want to attain food sovereignty, the beginning should be what we can get to plant, and that is quality seeds. The UDS research team also made a presentation, and that focused on the recent bad experience regarding the drought. As I said this morning, I came across farmers who were crying on their farms. And what the presenter did not remind you about is that what really happened, some of us who come from there, we are going to suffer. Those of us, the few of us who are in government employment, because of the mass failure, the farmers who are our brothers, our mothers, our sisters, they will run to us. They have already started knocking at our doors. Can you imagine? From 400 Ghana cedis, a bag of corn, the price, shot up to 700, and as we are talking, it's about a few cedis below 1,000 Ghana cedis. 1,000 Ghana cedis, only a few people can afford to buy that. So government has to really, really pay attention to that. And I'm happy to learn that about 8 billion Ghana cedis is going to be mobilized and to take care of these unprecedented victims. People who have lost their crops. Some people plowed 2 times and they failed. Others attempted again, but it was a disaster. It's unfortunate, and it should be a national worry. Because if half of the country is sick, I think it can give a very deadly blow to the rest of the country. Ladies and gentlemen, the UDS research also highlighted the need to plan. Prevention is better than cure. If government was already collaborating with researchers, like my colleague professor said, R&D, maybe we would have realized the signals and then to put in preventive measures to minimize the negative impact of the drought. There was this issue of spraying using chemicals, and that goes a long way to affect our land in terms of land fertility. A lot was said about it, but what I didn't hear is that some of us, it's not the farmers alone. Even in our own homes, we are so lazy to weed around our compounds. But we use sprays. We ourselves are victims. It's not only the farmers. Several times I have been approached to give approval so that they spray around my house, and I said no. Because after rains, you do not know which direction the water will take the chemicals to. So whether the farmer or you yourself, I think we all have to check the extent to which we use chemicals. MC, I want to thank you very much for the plenary session. It really brought up so many issues. Capacity development is key. Prioritizing our agenda, our needs as a country is very, very important. Ladies and gentlemen, I will end my comments by letting you know or reminding you of John 19:30 in the Bible. John 19:30 is when Christ was on the cross and they gave him the drink. After taking the drink, Christ said, "It is." So is it finished in Ghana? We are now drinking the galamsey. My dear brothers and sisters, I don't think it's finished yet. There is still hope. But a nation that is able to have very good environmental plans, provide adequate funding, and then also have food sovereignty, as well as political will to control environmental issues, that country is complete. But a nation that only says it has environmental plans without other things, that country is finished. If there is another nation with only environmental plans, adequate funding, but does not have food sovereignty, that country is completely finished. Finally, there is also another country. No environmental plan, no adequate funding, no food sovereignty, and the political will to control environmental issues is not there, that country is finished completely. Thank you very much.
Please, let's appreciate Prof. So if there are 3 things in 2 batches that you remember, Prof, for the 3 C's, and then it is... On that note, ladies and gentlemen, the accounts have a saying, Pinyin Jariana Insio Ensio Asan. And I don't have any further ensio to Jare, but to say thank you for your participation today. We are back tomorrow for another intriguing session. So please do have a wonderful day. And as you make your way out of here, be sure to get someone's contact network. You don't know where you'll meet your future wife or your future in-law. God bless you all. And let's make sure that we are doing the best of things. But before we wrap up, we'll take a brief announcement. Yes, my sister is rushing here with a brief announcement, and then we can call it a day. Okay, so quick announcement. There is a package for every single one of us. So before you leave, make sure that you get to the desk at the back, and then be sure to pick up your package. And please, and this one is to me. Tomorrow we are all coming early. Let's all come early so that we can do things quite early, and then we can depart. So God bless you so much. Do have a wonderful day. My name is Kojo Mensah, and I'll see you all back here tomorrow, God willing. Bye-bye.